Hi, this is John again, the owner and developer of VectorDecks. In this tutorial, we're going to go over the option of using real objects and the relationship it has on the steps. As I mentioned in many of the other tutorials, it's always good to make all the finishes on all the different parts within the deck from the VectorDecks frame. That way all the information is passed and everything will always look the same. But there's going to be one particular use, and that's the use real objects, where it may come into a situation where you're going to have to control that within the step itself. When it relates to use real objects and the railing height, when the use real object option is checked, you're basically inserting different symbols that are created, and they're fixed in size. Unlike the parameters that you can enter dimensions in, these particular objects are fixed, and sometimes they don't quite work when you change the different rail heights. I'm going to show you an example here. I'm going to change this to 42. Now you see these pickets are too short because they're made for a 36-inch rail, so you're going to have to physically go in and change that picket to a 42-inch picket. So I select that 42-inch, now it works. Now when I click OK and go out, all the rail systems are going to change to 42 inches, and the 42-inch ballasts are now inserted. But now you see here, here's the issue with the handrail of the steps. In the VectorDecks frame, we selected use rail objects, and all the objects have their use deck info selected. Here's the step with that use deck info. So VectorDecks tells all the different rails throughout the entire deck to go ahead and change to a 42-inch rail and insert that 42-inch standard picket that we selected in that use rail objects. But with the steps, in most counties, from the nose of the step to the top of the handrail has to be no more or no less than 34.5 inches. So the step rail hasn't moved. We had that set to 34.5. But the pickets are made for that 42-inch rail, so it popped itself up. Now we have two options that we can do with this. I'm going to go ahead and select that step and go to its step specifications. We're still using the sun deck info, but in the step specs you could either change the height, add another 6 inches to this, which would make it 40.5. Go ahead and apply the change. So now instead of 34.5 we have 40.5. Click OK. Now we're all good. You'll see it renders and nothing extends through here, and everything is acceptable. The only problem here is then you're going to have to insert sort of a lower rail down on these particular steps, so the top of that interior rail is 34.5 inches up from the deck. Currently my VectorDecks step tool doesn't have that as an option to be able to insert that additional rail. I am working on it, but it's extensive, so it may be a while. So another option here is to go ahead and turn this use deck info off and make manual changes, making this a 36-inch picket. It's probably best to first go ahead and make all the changes you would like. I'm going to show you another example here. Let's go into that VectorDecks frame. Let's change the rail objects balusters. Let's make this, oops, it should have been 42. See how the 36 is not working. Let's select the 42. In fact, let's make the finish black, so we have that black iron kind of look to it. Keep everything else the same. Now I'm going to click OK. Now you'll see that particular type of baluster is going to appear throughout the entire deck. Now I'm comfortable with this is what I want, but I don't want to have to insert an additional rail down the side. So the best thing to do is, once you're comfortable with all the different finishes, go ahead and select that step turn Use Deck Info off. It's going to maintain what it's got because that's the current setting. I'm going to go into the step specifications, and you see here at the top you have control over the step rails independent from the landing rails. So what we can do is turn the step rails to 36. We have to remember though, if we lower the step rails back down to that 36, we need to change that baluster also to that 36. And then in the landing rail, we're going to keep it, instead of 36, we're going to keep it at 42. Now the other thing we need to do is go to that step specs, and in step specs let's lower that back down to 34.5 and click apply. Now I'm going to double check my settings. We have a rail with the setting at 36, and its real object is a 36, and then in the landing we're still at 42. Its baluster is at 42. So let's go ahead and click OK. Now you'll see this particular handrail will drop down to that 34.5 inches from the nose of the step up, but everything else still conforms to that 42 inches. Now it's important though that we don't turn that Use Deck Info back on. If we do, it's going to pull all the information back over. So this is the other option you have if you're using a 42-inch rail and you want to maintain that 34.5-inch rail height without having to insert that interior rail along its sides. Now again, this is only an issue when you have your Use Rail Objects checked. If you have this unchecked, then the railing system is going to be created based on the dimensions you enter here, and it will have no adverse effect regardless of what rail height you've checked here. But you won't be able to insert any of these fancy type of balusters unless you have Use Rail Objects checked. So it's something to consider. You can use the custom settings, but they're pretty much going to be vertical square balusters or vertical round ones.